The frozen winds of Kelthera Prime howled across the crystalline wasteland, carrying with them the bitter cold that could freeze blood in seconds. Princess Zareth pulled her tattered royal robes tighter around her slender frame, her violet skin already showing the telltale signs of frostbite along her delicate features. The ornate crown that once symbolized her authority over 3 star systems now felt like a mockery, its precious metals conducting the deadly cold directly to her skull. 3 days had passed since her own royal guard had cast her out into this desolate moon's surface. 3 days since she discovered the brutal truth about her father's death and her brother's treacherous ascension to the throne. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, but it was the abandonment by those she had trusted with her life that truly shattered her spirit. Every face that had sworn loyalty to her bloodline had turned away when Prince Vextor offered them greater rewards for their silence. Zareth stumbled forward through the knee-deep snow, her elegant court shoes providing no protection against the elements. Her people, the Catharians, were adapted for the warm, humid climate of their homeworld's tropical regions. This frozen hell was as alien to her as it would be to any creature of warmth and light. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each exhalation forming instant crystals that tinkled to the ground like broken dreams. The princess had been forced to watch as her transport ship lifted off, leaving her stranded on this uninhabitable moon with nothing but the clothes on her back and the fading hope that somehow someone would realize the injustice being done. But as the hours turned to days, that hope had withered like a flower in winter. No rescue would come. Her brother had made certain that all loyal to her cause had been eliminated or bought. She was truly alone in the universe. Behind her, the snow had already begun to cover her footprints, erasing any evidence of her passage through this white purgatory. The irony was not lost on her that she, who had once commanded fleets capable of reshaping planets, could not even leave a lasting mark in the snow. Her legacy would die here, forgotten and unmourned, while her brother consolidated power built on lies and murder. As night fell across the barren landscape, the temperature plummeted even further. Zareth's movements became sluggish, her thoughts cloudy with the onset of hypothermia. She knew she had perhaps hours before her body would simply shut down, another casualty of political ambition and familial betrayal. The princess had read about death from exposure in her studies of primitive worlds, but she never imagined she would experience it firsthand. In the distance, a strange sound caught her attention. At first she dismissed it as another trick of the wind, but it came again, clearer this time. It was a rhythmic thumping, like something moving through the deep snow with determined purpose. Zareth's heart raced with sudden hope, then immediately crashed as reality set in. What could possibly survive in this wasteland? More likely it was some predator drawn by her scent, coming to claim an easy meal. The sound grew closer, accompanied now by a peculiar panting noise and what sounded almost like excitement. Whatever was approaching seemed unaffected by the brutal conditions that were killing her slowly but surely. As her vision began to blur from exhaustion and cold, Zareth saw a dark shape emerge from the swirling snow, moving with surprising speed and agility across the treacherous terrain. To her amazement, the creature appeared to be some sort of quadruped, its thick fur coat providing perfect insulation against the cold. But what struck her most was its behavior. Instead of stalking her like a predator, it bounded toward her with what could only be described as joy, its tail wagging frantically and its tongue lolling out despite the freezing air. The creature was unlike anything in the Catharian biological databases, yet something about its demeanor suggested intelligence and, impossibly, friendliness. As the animal drew near, Zareth could see it more clearly. It was roughly the size of a small Catharian, covered in dense golden and brown fur that seemed perfectly adapted for Arctic conditions. Its eyes were warm and brown, filled with an intelligence that spoke of more than mere animal instinct. Most remarkably, it wore what appeared to be some sort of technological collar, suggesting it belonged to someone or something capable of advanced manufacturing. The creature approached her without fear, sniffing at her robes and making soft whimpering sounds that seemed almost sympathetic. When it looked up at her with those expressive eyes, Zareth felt a connection she had never experienced before. Here was a being that seemed to recognize her distress and want to help, without any knowledge of her royal status or political value. It was the first genuine kindness she had experienced since her world had collapsed around her. Suddenly, the animal turned and began moving away, then stopped, and looked back at her expectantly. It repeated this behavior several times, clearly trying to communicate something urgent. Despite her weakening condition, Zareth understood the creature wanted her to follow. With no other options and nothing left to lose, she forced her frozen limbs to move, stumbling after her unlikely savior through the howling blizzard. The journey that followed tested every remaining ounce of her strength. The creature seemed to understand her limitations, frequently stopping to wait for her to catch up and even attempting to break trail through the deepest snowdrifts. Several times when Zareth collapsed from exhaustion, the warm animal pressed against her, sharing its body heat and somehow giving her the strength to continue. As they crested a low hill, Zareth saw something that made her question whether hypothermia had finally claimed her sanity. Ahead, partially buried in snow but unmistakably artificial, was some sort of structure. Lights glowed warmly through frosted windows, and smoke rose from what appeared to be a heating system. It was impossible yet undeniably real. Someone or something had established a habitation in this frozen wasteland, and her four-legged guide was leading her directly to it. The creature bounded ahead and began barking at the structure's entrance, its excitement evident in every movement. Moments later, the door opened, spilling warm light across the snow, and a figure emerged that would change everything Zareth thought she knew about the universe. The figure that emerged from the warm shelter was unlike anything in Zareth's extensive education about galactic species. Bipedal like her own people, but shorter and more compact, with pale skin exposed to the brutal cold yet showing no signs of distress. The being wore simple, practical clothing that seemed designed for this harsh environment and, most remarkably, showed no surprise at finding a dying alien princess on their doorstep. "Easy there, buddy," the stranger said to the excited creature, which was now dancing around both of them with obvious joy. The language was completely foreign to Zareth, yet something in the tone conveyed gentleness and affection. When the being's eyes met hers, she saw immediate concern and determination, the same expression her own people wore when facing a crisis that demanded action. Without hesitation, the stranger stepped into the snow and gently but firmly took hold of Zareth's arm, supporting her weight as her legs finally gave out completely. The warmth radiating from this being's body was shocking, as if they generated heat like a living furnace. As they helped her toward the shelter, Zareth caught glimpses of the impossible technology that made survival possible in this wasteland. The structure itself was a marvel of engineering, clearly designed by a species that understood both efficiency and comfort. Solar collectors and wind generators provided power despite the harsh conditions, while the building's design channeled and redirected the constant winds to aid in heating rather than fighting against them. Everything spoke of a people who adapted to their environment rather than simply trying to dominate it. Inside, the warmth hit Zareth like a physical blow, and she immediately began shivering uncontrollably as her body tried to restore normal circulation. The stranger guided her to a chair near a heating unit, then quickly began gathering supplies with practiced efficiency. They moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to medical emergencies, checking her extremities for frostbite and wrapping her in insulated blankets. The four-legged creature, meanwhile, had settled beside her chair and was watching her with continued concern. Now that she was in better light, Zareth could see the animal more clearly. Its fur was indeed perfectly adapted for cold weather, but its build and facial features were unlike any Arctic predator she knew of. The technological collar was clearly of the same origin as the shelter's equipment, suggesting a close relationship between the creature and her rescuer. "You're lucky Max found you when he did," the stranger said, and though Zareth couldn't understand the words, the meaning was clear from context. The creature's name was apparently Max, and he had indeed saved her life. As if understanding he was being discussed, Max's tail wagged and he made a soft sound that seemed to be his way of acknowledging the praise. The stranger disappeared into another room and returned with a steaming cup containing some sort of warm liquid. They helped Zareth hold the cup with her trembling hands and guided it to her lips. The drink was unlike anything she had ever tasted, sweet and warming with a complex flavor that seemed to spread heat throughout her body. Whatever it was working to restore her core temperature faster than should have been possible. As feeling returned to her extremities, Zareth became more aware of her surroundings. The shelter was comfortable and well organized, with multiple rooms and amenities that suggested permanent residence rather than temporary accommodation. Scientific instruments and communication equipment lined one wall, while another area appeared to be dedicated to food preparation and storage. Everything was clean, efficient, and designed with careful attention to both function and comfort. Most intriguingly, there were images and displays showing various landscapes and creatures, none of which Zareth recognized from known galactic databases. The technology was advanced but different from what she knew, following design principles that prioritized reliability and repairability over pure performance. It was the technology of a people who expected to be far from support systems and needed equipment they could maintain themselves. The stranger continued to monitor her condition, checking her pulse and temperature with instruments that seemed to work on principles she didn't recognize. Their bedside manner was professional yet compassionate, treating her not as a curiosity or potential threat, but simply as someone who needed help. In her experience with galactic diplomacy, such selfless behavior was remarkable and rare. Max, meanwhile, had appointed himself as her personal guardian, positioning himself where he could watch both her and the entrance to the shelter. His alertness suggested he was more than just a companion animal, possibly serving as an early warning system for the harsh environment outside. The bond between him and the stranger was clearly deep and built on mutual trust and affection. As warmth and feeling gradually returned to her body, Zareth tried to communicate her gratitude. She pointed to herself and said her name slowly, then gestured toward her rescuer with a questioning tone. The stranger smiled, the first truly warm expression she had seen in weeks, and pointed to themselves while saying what sounded like Marcus. Then they pointed to Max and repeated his name, clearly understanding her desire to know who had saved her life. Marcus, as she now knew to call him, continued to care for her with a patience and gentleness that spoke of natural empathy. He brought her more of the warming drink, food that was simple but nutritious and perfectly adapted to her current physical needs, and extra blankets to ensure she stayed warm. Throughout it all, he maintained a respectful distance while making it clear he was available if she needed anything. The more Zareth observed, the more questions arose about these remarkable beings. Marcus showed no fear of her alien appearance, no hesitation in offering aid, and no apparent expectation of reward or recognition for his actions. In her experience with hundreds of galactic species, such behavior was almost unprecedented. Most civilizations, including her own, approached contact with unknown aliens with caution, suspicion, and careful calculation of benefit versus risk. Yet here was a being who lived alone in one of the most hostile environments imaginable, accompanied only by his four-legged companion, and his first instinct upon encountering a dying stranger was to provide immediate and unconditional assistance. It challenged everything she thought she knew about survival instincts and the nature of intelligence across the galaxy. As night deepened outside and the warmth continued to restore her strength, Zareth found herself studying Marcus with growing fascination. His species was clearly adapted for a wide range of environments, comfortable in conditions that would kill most other sapiens. More importantly, their society had apparently produced individuals capable of profound compassion and selfless action, even toward complete aliens. Max curled up beside her chair, his warmth adding to her comfort and his presence providing a sense of security she hadn't felt since before her father's death. Whatever species had created such loyal and intelligent companions had achieved something remarkable in the relationship between sapient and animal life. Dawn broke across the frozen wasteland with a pale light that transformed the endless white expanse into something almost beautiful. Zareth woke to find herself covered with additional blankets and Max still curled protectively beside her chair. The warmth had fully returned to her body, and for the first time in days she felt truly safe. Across the room, Marcus was preparing some sort of meal, moving quietly to avoid waking her. The smell of cooking food made her realize just how long it had been since she had eaten anything substantial. The Royal Guard had provided minimal rations during her exile journey, just enough to keep her alive until they abandoned her. Now the aroma of Marcus's cooking awakened a hunger that was almost painful in its intensity. Her stomach made an audible sound that caused Max to lift his head and look at her with what seemed like amusement. Marcus turned at the sound and smiled, saying something in his language that clearly meant good morning. He gestured toward a small washing area, indicating she could clean herself if she wished. The water was wonderfully warm, heated by the same efficient systems that kept the shelter comfortable. Looking at herself in the reflective surface he provided, Zareth was shocked at her appearance. Her violet skin was pale from cold and stress. Her elegant court hair was matted and tangled, and her royal robes were torn and stained beyond recognition. Yet Marcus had treated her with dignity and respect, seeing past her bedraggled appearance to the person beneath. In her own society, appearance and status were everything. To be seen in such a condition would have been mortifying, a loss of face that could take years to recover from. But this remarkable being had looked at a dying alien stranger and seen only someone who needed help. When she emerged from washing, Marcus had laid out a meal that was simple, but obviously prepared with care. The food was unlike anything in Catharian cuisine, but it was warm, filling, and surprisingly palatable to her alien digestive system. He had somehow intuited what might be safe for her to eat, showing an understanding of biology that spoke of either natural intelligence or previous experience with diverse species. As they ate together, Marcus attempted basic communication, pointing to objects and saying their names in his language. Zarath reciprocated, teaching him the Catharian words for the same items. It was slow progress, but his enthusiasm and patience made the process almost enjoyable. Max participated by bringing various items to them, as if he understood they were trying to learn from each other. Through gestures and simple drawings, Marcus managed to convey that he was some sort of researcher or scientist, studying the unique conditions of this frozen moon. The equipment she had noticed was for monitoring weather patterns, geological activity, and the sparse but hardy life forms that somehow survived in this harsh environment. He had been here alone for what seemed like a significant period, with only Max for companionship. The dedication required to pursue such research in isolation spoke of remarkable determination and strength of character. Most species would have established a full research station, with multiple personnel and extensive support systems. Yet Marcus had chosen to work alone, accepting the risks and hardships in pursuit of knowledge. It was both admirable and slightly concerning, suggesting his people valued individual achievement and self-reliance to an extraordinary degree. As the day progressed, Zarath began to understand more about her rescuer and his remarkable companion. Max was clearly more than just a pet or work animal. He served as an early warning system, a source of companionship, and apparently a rescue specialist capable of finding and leading people to safety. The bond between human and animal was unlike anything she had encountered in galactic civilization. Most advanced species had moved beyond close relationships with non-sapient life forms, viewing such connections as primitive or unnecessary. But watching Marcus and Max together, she began to see the profound benefits of such partnerships. Max provided emotional support, practical assistance, and unwavering loyalty, while Marcus provided care, protection, and purpose. Together, they were stronger than either could be alone. Marcus showed her his research data, complex charts and measurements that revealed the fascinating dynamics of this supposedly dead world. Beneath the frozen surface lay geothermal systems that created pockets of warmth, underground water systems that supported microbial life, and seasonal patterns that brought brief periods of slightly less hostile conditions. He had mapped safe routes across the terrain and identified resources that could support life for those who knew how to find them. The implications were staggering. This world that had been chosen for her execution, precisely because it was considered uninhabitable, actually supported a complex ecosystem for those with the knowledge and skills to access it. Marcus and Max had not just survived here, they had thrived, turning a frozen hell into a functioning research station and comfortable home. Through more detailed communication attempts, Zarath learned that Marcus was part of a larger civilization that apparently specialized in exploring and studying the galaxy's most challenging environments. They were called humans, and they seemed to have a particular talent for adapting to conditions that other species found impossible. Their approach was not to terraform worlds to suit their needs, but to understand and work within existing systems. The philosophical implications fascinated her almost as much as the practical ones. Her own people, like most galactic civilizations, approached hostile environments with overwhelming technology and brute force modification. They reshaped worlds to match their biological requirements, often destroying existing ecosystems in the process. Humans seem to take the opposite approach, learning to become part of the environment rather than its master. Marcus showed her images of other human research outposts, each adapted to radically different conditions. Some were underwater facilities studying ocean worlds, Others were underground complexes on high-radiation planets, and still others were floating stations in the atmospheres of gas giants. Humans had apparently spread throughout the galaxy not by conquest or colonization, but by scientific curiosity and the desire to understand everything they encountered. As evening approached, Marcus began preparing for what appeared to be a regular communication session with his home base. The equipment was sophisticated but designed for reliability over range, suggesting his people maintained regular contact with their far-flung researchers. He gestured to indicate that he would be telling them about finding her, and his expression suggested he expected this news to generate considerable interest. The prospect of contact with a larger human civilization both excited and worried Zarath. These people had shown remarkable kindness and competence, but they were also completely unknown to galactic databases. Their technology followed different principles. Their social structures were mysteries, and their intentions toward other species remained unclear. She could be about to make first contact with a civilization that might reshape the galactic balance of power. Max seemed to sense her nervousness and moved closer, offering the comfort of his warm presence. His steady breathing and calm demeanor helped her relax as she contemplated the momentous changes about to unfold. Whatever happened next, she owed her life to these remarkable beings, and that debt would influence her actions regardless of political considerations. The communication session began with Marcus speaking rapidly in his complex language, occasionally gesturing toward her or showing images on his displays. Even without understanding the words, she could tell he was excited about his discovery and eager to share the news with his colleagues. The responses from his home base seemed equally enthusiastic, with multiple voices joining the conversation as word spread about the alien refugee. The response from Marcus's home base was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the quiet research station had become the center of intense activity, as human civilization mobilized to address this unprecedented first contact situation. Additional communication arrays were activated, creating a network that spanned multiple star systems and connected some of the most brilliant minds in human space to this remote outpost. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead xenobiologist for the Human Research Consortium, appeared on the main display with an expression of barely contained excitement. Her rapid conversation with Marcus was filled with technical terms and urgent questions about Zarath's physiology, mental state, and the circumstances of her arrival. Despite the language barrier, Zarath could sense the profound significance this moment held for both species. Marcus worked tirelessly to facilitate communication, using his basic language lessons with Zarath to build translation algorithms that human computers could process. The speed and efficiency of their technology impressed her, but what struck her most was the collaborative approach. Rather than a single authority making decisions, dozens of specialists contributed their expertise to ensure the first contact proceeded smoothly. Within the communication network, linguists worked to decode Catharian grammar and syntax, while cultural anthropologists tried to understand the implications of finding a lone individual in such desperate circumstances. Medical specialists provided guidance on treating an alien physiology safely, and diplomatic experts debated the proper protocols for a situation that had no precedent in human experience. The humans' approach to first contact revealed much about their civilization. Rather than viewing Zarath as a potential threat or opportunity to be exploited, they seemed genuinely concerned with her welfare and interested in understanding her situation. Questions focused on her immediate needs, her health, and what had brought her to this desolate place, rather than demanding information about her species' technology or territorial boundaries. As translation capabilities improved, Zarath found herself able to communicate more effectively with the growing human team. Dr. Vasquez proved to be especially skilled at cross-species communication, using simple concepts and visual aids to bridge the gap between vastly different ways of thinking. Her patience and empathy made the process far less intimidating than it might have been. Through these conversations, Zarath began to share her story carefully at first, then with growing confidence as she realized the humans were genuinely interested in justice and truth, rather than political advantage. She explained about her father's death, her brother's coup, and the betrayal that had led to her exile. The human responses were immediate and emotional, with clear expressions of outrage at the injustice she had suffered. Captain James Morrison, apparently a senior military officer, joined the communication session to discuss security implications. His questions were direct and professional, but always respectful of her situation. He wanted to understand the political dynamics of Catharian space, not to exploit them, but to assess whether her presence on the human research station might create diplomatic complications or put Marcus and Max at risk. The humans' concern for Marcus's safety touched Zareth deeply. Despite her royal status and the potential value of her knowledge about galactic civilization, they prioritized the welfare of their lone researcher and his companion. It spoke of a society that valued individual lives over political or strategic advantages, a philosophy that was refreshing after years of court intrigue and calculated relationships. Max, meanwhile, had become something of a celebrity among the human communication team. Multiple specialists asked to see him, marveling at his apparent understanding of the situation and his continued protective behavior toward Zareth. Dog behavior experts analyzed his actions and concluded that he had deliberately sought her out, recognizing her distress from a considerable distance and making the decision to lead her to safety. The implications fascinated the humans. Max had demonstrated problem-solving abilities, cross-species empathy, and independent decision-making that suggested intelligence beyond what they had previously documented in his species. His collar, it turned out, contained sophisticated monitoring equipment that had recorded the entire rescue, providing unprecedented data on animal cognition and interspecies interaction. Dr. Sarah Chen, a specialist in human-animal partnerships, explained that Max represented thousands of years of coevolution between humans and dogs. The relationship had shaped both species, creating animals with enhanced social intelligence and humans with improved emotional awareness. It was a form of symbiotic development that apparently had no parallel among other galactic civilizations. As days passed and communication improved, Zareth found herself increasingly impressed by human civilization. Their technology was remarkably robust and adaptable, their social structures emphasized cooperation and individual worth, and their approach to challenges was both innovative and pragmatic. They had achieved interstellar travel and scientific advancement while maintaining the emotional connections and ethical principles that many advanced species seem to lose. Arrival of additional humans to the research station was handled with impressive efficiency. A small diplomatic team led by Ambassador Patricia Reynolds arrived via a ship that was notable for its practical design and advanced but unobtrusive technology. Unlike the imposing vessels favored by most galactic powers, the human ship seemed designed for exploration and peaceful contact rather than intimidation. Ambassador Reynolds proved to be a remarkable individual, combining diplomatic skill with genuine warmth and curiosity. Her first concern was Zareth's continued welfare, ensuring she had proper medical attention and comfortable accommodations while the complex process of first contact continued. The ambassador's approach was refreshingly direct, focusing on practical issues rather than elaborate protocols. The medical examination conducted by Dr. James Wright revealed fascinating parallels between human and Catharian physiology. Both species were remarkably adaptable, with biological systems that could function effectively in a wide range of environmental conditions. The similarities suggested either common evolutionary origins or remarkable convergent development, possibilities that excited researchers on both sides. Most importantly, the humans demonstrated an approach to interspecies relations that was unlike anything Zareth had encountered in galactic politics. Rather than seeking immediate advantage or rushing to establish formal treaties, they focused on building genuine understanding and trust. Their questions about Catharian society came from curiosity rather than calculation, and their offers of assistance carried no obvious strings attached. The transformation of the research station into an impromptu diplomatic facility showcased human adaptability and resourcefulness. Additional living space was created, communication systems were upgraded, and cultural exchange protocols were established, all while maintaining the scientific research that had brought Marcus and Max to this frozen world in the first place. Max adapted to the changes with remarkable ease, seeming to enjoy the additional attention while maintaining his protective watch over Zareth. The bond they had formed during her rescue had deepened into something that transcended species barriers, A connection based on trust and mutual care that impressed even the experienced diplomats who had come to facilitate first contact. As formal discussions began about Zarath's future and the potential relationship between human and Catharian civilizations, one thing had become clear. Her rescue by a human and his dog had set in motion events that would reshape the galactic balance of power. But unlike previous first contacts, this one was founded on compassion rather than conquest, understanding rather than exploitation. The revelation of human capabilities sent shockwaves through the galactic political landscape when news of first contact finally reached the major powers. Intelligence networks that had been focused entirely on known civilizations suddenly scrambled to understand how an entire spacefaring species had operated in their midst without detection. The humans, it seemed, had been quietly studying galactic civilization for decades, while remaining completely invisible to established powers. Admiral Sarah Harrison, commander of the human Deep Space Fleet, arrived at the research station aboard a vessel that redefined Zarath's understanding of spacecraft design. The ship was neither the largest nor most obviously powerful she had ever seen, but its capabilities became apparent through subtle details. The hull showed evidence of adaptive camouflage technology. The engine signatures were remarkably clean and quiet, and the overall design prioritized stealth and endurance over intimidation. Through Admiral Harrison, Zarath learned that humans had been conducting reconnaissance missions throughout the galaxy for generations, always careful to observe without interfering. They had studied dozens of civilizations, learned multiple languages, and developed detailed understanding of galactic politics and technology. Their invisibility had been deliberate policy, designed to gather information while avoiding the conflicts that seemed to consume most spacefaring species. The human approach to galactic exploration reflected their fundamental philosophy about contact with other civilizations. Rather than announcing their presence and demanding recognition, they had chosen to understand first and reveal themselves only when circumstances demanded it. Zarath's rescue had forced their hand, but they seemed prepared for eventual contact with a thoroughness that was both impressive and slightly unsettling. Dr. Michael Torres, the human expert on galactic civilizations, provided Zarath with intelligence reports that revealed the true scope of human knowledge about her own people. They knew about the succession crisis that had followed her father's death, understood the complex web of alliances and betrayals that had enabled her brother's coup, and had detailed assessments of the military and political capabilities of every major faction in Catharian space. The implications were staggering. Humans had been watching galactic civilization like scientists observing experimental subjects, gathering data, and developing theories about behavior and development patterns across multiple species. Their perspective was uniquely objective, uncolored by participation in the political struggles and cultural biases that shaped the views of established powers. Most remarkably, the humans had identified patterns in galactic conflict and development that had escaped the notice of civilizations that were living through them. They had documented cycles of expansion and consolidation, tracked the rise and fall of alliances, and developed predictive models that could forecast political developments with startling accuracy. Their analysis suggested that galactic civilization was approaching a critical transition point that would reshape power structures across known space. General Patricia Kim, the human military strategist, explained their assessment of the current galactic situation with clinical precision. The major powers were overextended, maintaining unstable alliances through force rather than mutual benefit. Resource conflicts were increasing as populations expanded faster than sustainable development could support them. Most critically, the technological gap between advanced and developing civilizations was creating social instabilities that threatened the foundation of interstellar order. Into this volatile environment, humans offered something unprecedented, a mature spacefaring civilization with advanced capabilities, but no territorial ambitions or historical grievances. Their technology was sophisticated, but designed for exploration and research rather than conquest. Their society had achieved interstellar capability while maintaining the ethical frameworks and emotional intelligence that seemed to deteriorate in most species as they gained power. The human proposal for dealing with Zarath's situation reflected this unique perspective. Rather than simply offering her asylum or attempting to use her knowledge for their own advantage, They suggested a more ambitious approach. They would help her reclaim her rightful throne, but not through military intervention or political manipulation. Instead, they would provide her with the tools and support needed to expose the truth about her father's death and her brother's illegal seizure of power. Commander Lisa Park, head of Human Intelligence Operations, had developed a comprehensive plan that relied on information warfare, rather than traditional military action. Using their extensive surveillance network and advanced communication technologies, humans could provide irrefutable evidence of Prince Vextor's crimes to key figures throughout Catharian space. The goal was to turn public opinion and political support away from the usurper by revealing the truth rather than imposing change through external force. The elegance of the human approach impressed Zareth far more than any display of military might could have. They understood that lasting political change had to come from within, that imposed solutions created resentment and instability that ultimately failed. By providing her with the means to reclaim her throne through legitimate channels, they were offering something far more valuable than conquest or rescue. Max had become an integral part of the planning sessions, his presence seeming to calm tensions and facilitate communication between species with very different approaches to problem solving. The humans had concluded that his ability to read emotional states and provide comfort was actually a form of intelligence that enhanced group decision-making processes. His continued devotion to Zareth had also become a powerful symbol of the genuine friendship developing between human and Catharian civilizations. The technical capabilities revealed during the planning process demonstrated why humans had remained undetected for so long. Their stealth technology was decades ahead of anything in the galactic databases. Their computer systems could penetrate most known security measures without detection, and their surveillance networks provided real-time intelligence on activities throughout known space. They had achieved technological superiority while avoiding the conflicts and resource expenditures that typically accompanied such development. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the human expert on interstellar law, explained how they would present the evidence against Prince Vextor through established Catharian legal channels. The approach required detailed understanding of court procedures, political relationships, and cultural nuances that humans had spent decades studying. Their plan would work entirely within existing systems, making it impossible for Vextor to claim foreign interference or rally nationalist sentiment against outside intervention. The preparation phase revealed the extraordinary depth of human intelligence gathering. They had identified key figures in Catharian society who had suspected the truth about the succession but lacked proof. Political leaders who were uncomfortable with Vextor's authoritarian tendencies, and military commanders who remained loyal to the legitimate royal line. The humans had psychological profiles, communication patterns, and strategic assessments for hundreds of individuals who would play crucial roles in the restoration process. As the plan developed, Zareth began to understand that she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Humans were offering to intervene in a major political crisis not for their own benefit, but because they believed in justice and legitimate governance. Their capabilities could have easily allowed them to seize control of Catharian space or extract valuable concessions, but their goals were purely altruistic. The contrast with traditional galactic politics was stark and uncomfortable. Most civilizations, including her own, approached interstellar relations as zero-sum competitions, where advantage could only be gained at others' expense. The human model suggested that cooperation and mutual benefit were not only possible, but more effective than traditional power politics. Captain Jennifer Walsh, who would command the mission to restore Zareth to her throne, embodied the human approach to leadership. Her authority came from competence and the trust of her subordinates rather than formal rank or political connections. She listened to input from all team members regardless of their position in the hierarchy, made decisions based on evidence rather than political considerations, and accepted personal responsibility for the outcomes of her choices. The mission planning sessions became exercises in collaborative problem-solving that impressed Zareth with their efficiency and thoroughness. Humans seemed to have perfected the art of constructive disagreement, with team members challenging each other's assumptions and proposals without creating personal conflicts or undermining group cohesion. Every aspect of the operation was examined from multiple perspectives, refined through debate, and tested against worst-case scenarios. Lieutenant Commander David Chen, the mission's technology specialist, demonstrated capabilities that would have been considered impossible by most galactic civilizations. His team had developed communication systems that could penetrate any known security measures. Surveillance devices that were virtually The return to Cytherian space marked Zareth's first glimpse of her home system in months, but the familiar stars now held different meanings. Through human eyes, she saw her civilization's achievements and failures with new clarity. The massive orbital habitats that had once symbolized Cytherian engineering prowess now appeared inefficient and overly complex, built for display rather than function. The military patrols that enforced her brother's authority seemed clumsy and predictable compared to human operational techniques. Captain Walsh's ship approached the system using stealth capabilities that made their presence invisible to Cytherian sensors. The humans had studied defensive patterns for months, identifying blind spots and predictable patrol routes that allowed undetected entry. Their technology was so advanced that they could monitor communications throughout the system while remaining completely undetected themselves. The intelligence picture that emerged from their surveillance was both encouraging and disturbing. Prince Vextor's rule had grown increasingly harsh as resistance to his authority developed. Political prisoners filled detention facilities, dissent was met with violent suppression, and the economy was suffering under the strain of maintaining power through force rather than consent. The conditions were perfect for a legitimacy crisis, but they also meant that many innocent people were suffering under tyrannical rule. Max had adapted remarkably well to shipboard life, quickly learning the layout and routines that allowed him to move freely through the vessel. His presence seemed to improve morale among the human crew, providing emotional support and stress relief during the tense approach to potentially hostile territory. More importantly, his continued devotion to Zareth served as a constant reminder of the mission's moral foundation. Dr. Torres had identified 3 key figures whose support would be crucial for exposing Vextor's crimes and restoring legitimate rule. General Kaveth, the former Royal Guard commander who had been demoted for questioning the succession, retained significant influence within the military. Counselor Daramin, a respected legal scholar, had the credibility to validate evidence of criminal wrongdoing. Most importantly, High Priestess Velana controlled the religious institutions that provided moral authority throughout Cytherian society. The human plan required precise timing and coordination to reach all 3 targets simultaneously before Vextor's security forces could respond. Commander Park had developed infiltration protocols that would allow evidence packages to be delivered directly to each recipient, while making it appear the information had come from internal sources rather than external intervention. The goal was to create a cascade of revelations that would overwhelm the prince's ability to suppress or discredit the truth. Lieutenant Commander Chen's technical team had worked for weeks to prepare the evidence packages, ensuring they contained irrefutable proof of Vextor's crimes, while protecting the sources and methods used to gather the information. Medical records proved that Zareth's father had been poisoned. Communication intercepts revealed the conspiracy to eliminate loyal officials, and financial records documented the bribes paid to secure military and political support for the coup d'etat. The psychological warfare component of the operation was equally sophisticated. Dr. Martinez had crafted the presentation of evidence to appeal specifically to each recipient's values and concerns. General Kaveth received military analysis showing how Vextor's purges had weakened planetary defenses. Counselor Daramin got legal documentation proving constitutional violations. High Priestess Velana was provided with evidence of moral corruption and betrayal of sacred oaths. As the operation commenced, Zareth found herself in the unprecedented position of watching her own restoration unfold from the bridge of an alien warship. The human crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring communications throughout the system and adjusting their approach based on real-time intelligence. Their technology allowed them to track the delivery and reception of each evidence package, ensuring the plan proceeded exactly as designed. The first responses came within hours as the recipients of the evidence began to understand the full scope of Vextor's crimes. General Kaveth immediately began contacting other military commanders, sharing selected portions of the evidence and building support for action against the usurper. His reputation for honor and competence gave weight to his accusations, making it difficult for loyalists to dismiss the charges as political propaganda. Councillor Daramin took a different approach, using legal procedures to demand formal investigation of the evidence. Her request for judicial review created official documentation that would be difficult to suppress or ignore, while her scholarly reputation made it impossible to dismiss her concerns as biased or uninformed. The legal challenge forced Vextor to choose between allowing investigation or openly violating constitutional procedures. High Priestess Velana's response was perhaps the most devastating. Her public statement declaring the succession illegitimate and calling for justice carried enormous moral authority throughout Catharian society. Religious leaders across the system began echoing her words, creating a groundswell of moral outrage that no amount of political manipulation could contain. The coordination between these three pillars of Catharian society created exactly the effect the humans had predicted. Military leaders found themselves with legal and moral justification for action against Vextor, while civilian authorities had religious and military support for investigating his crimes. The prince's authority began crumbling as the foundations of his power structure turned against him. Vextor's response revealed both his desperation and the fundamental weakness of his position. Rather than addressing the evidence or defending his actions, he declared martial law and began arresting anyone who questioned his authority. The heavy-handed reaction only confirmed the accusations against him while demonstrating the authoritarian nature of his rule to previously neutral observers. Captain Walsh monitored these developments with professional satisfaction, her team's intelligence gathering, providing real-time assessment of the changing political situation. The humans had successfully triggered the cascade of revelations they had planned, but the ultimate outcome would depend on the courage and determination of the Catharian people themselves. The tipping point came when General Cavith issued a formal challenge to Prince Vextor's legitimacy, backed by detailed evidence and supported by a coalition of military commanders who controlled most of the system's defensive forces. The general's declaration that he would no longer recognize Vextor's authority effectively split the military, with most units choosing to follow their respected former leader rather than the increasingly isolated prince. As news of the military revolt spread throughout the system, civilian authorities began declaring their support for investigation and justice. The evidence provided by the humans had created a perfect storm of opposition that Vextor could not suppress through force alone. His remaining supporters began abandoning him as it became clear that his position was no longer sustainable. The final phase of the operation required Zarath to make her own public appearance, returning to reclaim her throne now that the groundwork had been laid for her restoration. The humans had prepared her for this moment, but the responsibility for convincing her own people ultimately rested with her alone. Standing before the communication array that would broadcast her message throughout Catharian space, she felt the weight of history and the hope of justice converging in a single moment that would define her civilization's future. Zarath's broadcast to the Catharian people marked the culmination of the most unusual restoration in galactic history. Standing before cameras in the human command center, flanked by Max, whose steady presence gave her strength, she spoke directly to her subjects for the first time since her exile. Her words were carefully chosen but delivered with genuine emotion, acknowledging the suffering they had endured while promising a new beginning built on truth and justice. The response throughout Catharian space was immediate and overwhelming. Citizens who had lived in fear under Vextor's authoritarian rule saw in their returning princess not just legitimate authority, but hope for a better future. Her survival story, including the remarkable rescue by aliens who asked for nothing in return, captured imaginations and demonstrated that even in the darkest circumstances, compassion and courage could prevail. Prince Vextor's final desperate attempt to maintain power revealed the true nature of his character. Rather than accepting defeat or attempting negotiation, he ordered attacks on civilian populations who celebrated Zarath's return. The brutality of his response eliminated any remaining sympathy for his cause and galvanized previously neutral parties to support the restoration. His own security forces began refusing orders, unwilling to fire on innocent people to protect a ruler whose legitimacy had been utterly destroyed. General Caveth coordinated the final military action with precision and restraint, moving to secure key installations while minimizing casualties. The professionalism of forces loyal to the legitimate government contrasted sharply with the chaos and desperation of Vextor's remaining supporters. Within hours, the usurper found himself isolated in the royal palace with only a handful of fanatic followers still willing to defend his failed regime. The humans maintained their invisibility throughout the final phase, monitoring events but allowing Catharian forces to complete the restoration without external intervention. Their role had been to provide the tools and evidence needed for justice to prevail, but the actual implementation remained entirely in Catharian hands. This approach preserved the legitimacy of the restoration while demonstrating respect for planetary sovereignty that impressed observers throughout galactic civilization. Max's presence during the final negotiations proved unexpectedly valuable. His ability to sense emotional states and calm tensions helped diffuse several potentially volatile confrontations between opposing factions. Catharian leaders who had been prepared for bitter conflicts found themselves discussing terms rationally, influenced by the calming presence of a creature whose only agenda was the well-being of those around him. The surrender of Prince Vextor came not through military defeat but through the complete collapse of his political support. Faced with overwhelming evidence of his crimes and abandoned by all but his most desperate followers, he finally accepted the futility of continued resistance. His formal abdication and submission to justice marked the end of one of the shortest and most destructive reigns in Catharian history. Zarath's first act as restored ruler was to establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that would investigate all crimes committed during the succession crisis while offering amnesty to those who had been coerced into collaboration. The approach, influenced by human models of transitional justice, prioritized healing over revenge and focused on preventing future abuses rather than simply punishing past wrongs. The revelation of human involvement in the restoration created intense debate throughout galactic civilization. Intelligence agencies scrambled to understand how an unknown species had operated undetected for so long, while political leaders reassessed their assumptions about the balance of power in known space. The humans' demonstration of advanced capabilities combined with restraint and ethical behavior challenged traditional models of interstellar relations. Captain Walsh's final report to Human Command emphasized the strategic implications of successful first contact. The operation had demonstrated human capabilities to galactic powers while establishing the moral framework for future interactions. By choosing to support justice rather than exploiting the situation for advantage, humans had positioned themselves as potential mediators and peacekeepers in a galaxy torn by conflict and mistrust. The formal establishment of diplomatic relations between human and Catharian civilization set precedents that would influence interstellar law for generations. The agreements emphasized mutual respect, technological exchange, and cooperative exploration, rather than traditional alliance structures based on military cooperation or economic exploitation. Both species committed to supporting justice and legitimate governance throughout their spheres of influence. Dr. Vasquez's xenobiological studies revealed fascinating parallels between human and Catharian development that suggested common evolutionary pressures shaped intelligent life throughout the galaxy. The research had implications far beyond academic interest, providing insights into how different species might cooperate more effectively despite biological and cultural differences. The partnership between Zarath and Max became a symbol of these possibilities. The transformation of Marcus's research station into a permanent diplomatic facility reflected the ongoing relationship between the two civilizations. Scientists from both species worked together to understand the unique environment of the frozen moon, while diplomats and cultural experts developed protocols for expanding contact with other galactic civilizations. The station became a model for how advanced species could interact constructively rather than competitively. Max's role in galactic diplomacy evolved far beyond what anyone could have imagined when he first bounded through the snow to rescue a dying alien princess. His natural empathy and emotional intelligence made him an unofficial ambassador between species, helping to bridge cultural gaps that might otherwise have created misunderstandings. Diplomatic protocols were modified to accommodate his presence at formal negotiations, where his calming influence consistently improved outcomes. The Broader implications of the Catharian Restoration rippled throughout galactic civilization as other oppressed populations sought human assistance in addressing injustices. The humans' careful response emphasized their commitment to supporting legitimate governance and justice, while avoiding interference in internal affairs that did not involve clear violations of fundamental rights. Their approach created new models for intervention that prioritized consent and legality over power and advantage. Zarath's reign as restored ruler proved remarkably successful, combining traditional Catharian values with innovative approaches learned from human civilization. Her government emphasized transparency, accountability, and citizen participation in ways that were revolutionary for her hierarchical society. The reforms attracted attention from across the galaxy as other civilizations studied the benefits of incorporating human governmental models. The friendship between a human, his dog, and an alien princess had grown into something that transcended individual relationships to influence the future of galactic civilization. Their story became legend, inspiring others to choose compassion over conquest, cooperation over competition, and justice over expediency. In a galaxy often defined by conflict and exploitation, they had demonstrated that different species could not only coexist but thrive together. As Zarath stood on the balcony of her restored palace, watching human and Catharian children play together in the gardens below, while Max supervised their activities with patient attention, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them all to this moment. A simple act of rescue in a frozen wasteland had become the foundation for a new era in interstellar relations, proving that sometimes the smallest gestures of kindness could reshape entire civilizations.